Very welcome back to the Rossie Podcast in association with Shannonside FM. I'm joined this week by Cathal Cregg to look back on Roscommon's 6-point win against Monaghan in the second round of the Allianz League Division 1. Cathal, it's good to be talking about a win. I was talking to you briefly off air there saying last year was kind of tough going. We didn't get too much victory. So to be talking about a win and a win in Division 1, it's a nice start to the year to get 2 points on the board as well after the first two.
Yeah, definitely a very positive performance, and this was to back it up after Killarney, which was a positive performance, even though we didn't get any points. Was great to see, especially with so many newcomers into the team, and they backed up the performances as well, which I suppose only bodes well going forward.
Yeah, because, to be honest, it couldn't have gone any better. Kerry last week, and we won't harp on about it, there was a lot of talk about controversy and Hoosiers, and I still think, look, we were hard done by at the end, but performance down there was better than probably anyone could imagine. I think most people were thinking probably 10 points was a lot of the thinking going down there. So to come so close to getting a result there, and the performance was excellent. Coming into this week's game against Monaghan, to win by 6 points, to win any Division 1 game by 6 points. I know both teams were being targeting, but 6 points is a convincing win. And for large parts of that second half, it was very comfortable, I have to say.
Yeah, it definitely was. I suppose the 15 minutes after half time laid the foundation for that, and Monaghan really threw in the towel, I suppose, at that stage. And I suppose the last 10 or 15 minutes were sort of played out by both teams without any great intensity. Roscommon probably dropped off a small bit in that period, which maybe was a bit worrying as well, because you wouldn't want to be doing it against better teams, or you definitely would be punished. But maybe that was just the way the game was. But overall, very positive.
Yeah, and it wasn't a surprise to me to see Rory Beggan starting. I know Monaghan kind of put in this dummy team that a lot of counties do with no mention of him, but I think Roscommon would have been planning for him. But he didn't really have the impact on it. A bit like the Bridget Scottstown game. Roscommon gave away no fouls outside the arc or inside. He had 145 and he had a free which he actually missed due to a breach. So again, it was disciplined defending from Roscommon not to give any frees away, because we know Beggan, sure, if you give him anything inside the 45, a lot of the time he's going to slot it over.
Yeah, exactly. Look, he's a huge player for them. I suppose realistically, there's only so much a keeper can do in with the new rules as well. He probably, bar missing the free, probably done as much as he could. To be fair to him, I suppose as a whole, Monaghan were probably just off the pace. I suppose in general,
Yeah, and from our point of view, I know Gabriel Bannigan and maybe other people run about who Monaghan are missing, and rightfully so. They have a few injuries and that. But you look at Roscommon, there's 10 to 15 players at least, I'd imagine, between Bridget's and a few injuries that are missing from that Roscommon team. And to put up the performance that they did in Killarney and this week, Mark Dowd again couldn't have asked for much more positive performances going into this bit of a break now as well, reset going into Armagh to get a bit more work done on the training pitch.
yeah, I suppose both teams came up last year. They're probably both at the start were probably favourites to go down. Both are in a bit of transition in terms of a good few players retiring and so on. But I think Roscommon would have to be very happy, and Mark Dowd would definitely be very happy with how the newcomers have done. Aaron Brady, very solid, has done well. Caleb Keogh, Paddy Gavin, Owen Ward came on yesterday. I thought Rossie Cregg, I don't know whether he picked up a knock, but I thought he done fine in the first half as well. I wouldn't have been taking him off. Sten Lamb, all of them have been really good. Conor Ryan, young fella in the middle of the field, very solid beside Doyle yesterday. And Darragh O'Connor has been a sensation with his pace. He showed it again yesterday. His pace is frightening, and that would be a huge thing going forward. I could name off more. Owen Colleran played last week. Robert Heenahan, all of them in their, I suppose, first two games at Division 1 level. You couldn't have asked for much more, really.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to go through those names, and you can even throw in Paul Carey, came on, hasn't had a whole. I know Paul Carey isn't, we'll say, young, but he hasn't had a whole pile of exposure at this level. Jack Ducken came on last week and got a couple of points as well. So yeah, I mean, there's so many positives there, and to be able to name all those players, and the biggest fear I had going into these games is that we lost them both, and you'd be nearly thinking we have to get the Bridges lads back in as quickly as we can and get them in starting. To have all these positive performances that maybe of course, but look, we know we need the Bridges lads, but maybe not to just throw them in straight away is definitely a plus.
Yeah, you won't have to be rushing them back. Realistically, the British lads will, the longer they can give them a break, the better, I think, for them. They've been on the road a long time now. And probably over the last 3 years, they've been on the road a long time. So a break, I suppose, for you seeing Stack and Eddie Nolan are going to be out till the end of the league, but I hope the injuries aren't too bad in terms of long run. But that rest will do them no harm mentally as much as physically. So I think, look, at yesterday's game was a huge one because I think whichever team lost it were definitely staring relegation in the face. Whereas there's 2 points on the board now, and you're moving into the Armagh game on a positive footing with a view to hopefully getting 2 more points.
Yeah, I mean, we went through the newer faces there. Look, one of the older dogs, even though he won't like me saying that, Enda Smith again, just showed again why he's still there. He's been on the road so long for Roscommon, but 2-2 yesterday. Lost the goal in the first half very well. Unlucky with the second. It was actually one blocked off the line that was heading straight for the top corner as well. That actually bet begging and lost the penalty in fantastic. And he was integral really to all the attacks. He was that kind of linked player that we needed.
Yeah, definitely. He was good yesterday, and Diarmid, I suppose, an elder statesman as well. He won't like to hear that, but he was very good yesterday. And Dylan Ryan, he's a bit younger than them, but he's around a long time now. I thought the three of them in particular were very good. Ending that third quarter just after half time was brilliant. He was involved in everything, and that really was what put the game to bed. And I think Roscommon in particular, they started on what was said at half time, but they really started the game at a serious pace in the second half. Two fisted points. I think we got a goal then, and then the 2-pointer and the penalty came. I think it was like 2-5 in the first 13 minutes of the second half, whereas Monaghan only scored 2 points in that period, and the game was nearly done and dusted at that stage. So, very impressive, I thought.
Yeah, and just on end as well, definitely against Monaghan and against Kerry, he seems to be being one of the three up more so than he was last year, we'll say. He seems to be staying closer up to goal. And I think that's a positive. I'd say we don't really need Enda back in the half-back line slogging away. You want him to be able to conserve his energy so he can go on those runs. He can take on his man in the attacking half, really. So that was one thing that I have noticed, that he seems to be staying closer to goal.
Yeah, they're definitely leaving him higher up, and I think it's one thing that we've seen in both games, in particular yesterday, is that Roscommon they're attacking forward with purpose and pace. I suppose they're putting the ball through the foot an awful lot more than they were the last couple of years, and even when they're not putting it through the foot, they're running at savage pace, whether that's Enda or Heenahan coming off the wing. I suppose the one that typified it yesterday was the goal. Diarmid intercepted that ball, kicked it to Heenahan, who kicked it to Enda, and he was, going at savage pace, taking on the man. And Diarmid was the one who eventually came off the end of that and put it in the back of the net. But he must have made up 80 or 90 meters of ground to get on the end of that. It took serious effort because he won that just out to the far 45, and there was two kicks and end of running. So to to be able to get on the end of that is that's, I suppose, the one big positive I would see from their attacking players, that it's going forward at savage pace, which suits our inside forwards then, like Darragh Cregg, who can get the ball in space.
Yeah, it's kind of a changing of it. Usually Diarmid to be the one to stay close for the goal. I know the last couple of years he's actually probably in the best shape he's been probably the last 2 or 3 years in terms of fitness and being able to drive from deep. So he's kind of playing in that half forward line a bit more. And Darragh Craig is actually playing a lot closer to goal this well, okay, it's a small sample size, but 2 games. The one other player, Darragh Heenan, it's like he's added just again a new dimension to that forward line, because it was always nearly Enda was near it was the not the lone soldier, but he was the one fella we always had that could drive through a defence, that can take on a fella and beat maybe 2 or 3 men. Geez, Darragh Heenan's getting the ball and he's deciding he's going. And with this new game and that bit of space, why wouldn't he?
Yeah, exactly. I knew he was fast because I played against him a few times at club level. But to go on the inter-county scene and be that much faster than all the other players is frightening. You know, he showed it in particular, I think it was for the goal against Kerry, but he done it maybe 3 times yesterday. Um, and it's going to be a serious asset for Roscommon going forward. He also chipped in with 2 points, and I think it was him that gave the ball into Paddy Gavin for the
Oh, yeah.
for the goal. That was a lovely pass too, lovely weighted pass, and a great run from Paddy Gavin. So he had a huge impact on the game, and for a lad who hasn't played at that level before, he's been a serious addition.
Yeah, and you have him, Endick can still do it, and you can add in Connor Hand as well. We've seen his performance in the Club All Ireland final. If you have those 3 fellas, like again, this new game is about pace and beating your man. That's going to be a serious asset if you can get those 3, isolated and 1-on-1 against their men.
Yeah, I suppose Mark will just decide what way he sets them up. But to have that sort of pace, and particularly guys who can carry the ball with that sort of pace, will be brilliant. I suppose Darragh probably has been unlucky not to be in the panel probably before this. He's had particularly the last 2 senior championships, he's been very good for Glavies. So I suppose he's getting his rewards now, which is well justified.
And we seem to compete quite well around the middle again. You're missing obviously Eddie Nolan and Shane Canan, but Keith Doyle is now one of the more experienced players around there, and Conor Ryan has settled in very well. So I think those two can be very happy with their 2 outings so far in Division 1.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the 2 of them yesterday. Nothing over the top, but very, very solid, I thought. Fielded the ball, moved the ball on. I think Keith, it's great to see him getting a run without any injuries. He's obviously worked on his fitness as well. He's getting up and down the field. And Conor Ryan, I've seen him playing under 20 and fine player, and he's settled in really well. I suppose last week against Kerry, they probably had a tough opening 20 or 25 minutes, and it looked like they were going to get overran, but they steadied it, and had a good solid game after that. So look at it, that looks like a good solid partnership going forward. Obviously they'll get tested against Armagh and Galway and the rest of the teams as they go through, but they'll have gained huge confidence from the last 2 days.
Yeah, and it's linking back as well. Aaron Brady now has got a couple of games. Again, Aaron Brady's been round the Roscommon panel for God knows how many years, really. He's still not, I say he's probably still only around mid-20-ish, but he's been there kind of number 16, really, for a lot of years now. But he's got his chance because Conor Carroll was involved with St. Bridget's and their All-Ireland run. And it's one of those, if Aaron Brady keeps playing well, and he has done in the first 2 games, reasonably well on kickouts as well, if you keep playing well, you're not really going to change your goalkeeper too quickly.
No, he's probably been unlucky. Colin Lavin and Connor were there before, and look, they weren't making any mistakes in particular. So he just didn't get his chance. I suppose now he's getting his chance, and for the first 2 games, he's been taking it. Aaron has always been a very good goalkeeper. He's well able to kick frees from long distances as well. He's shown that in this club championship over the last couple of years. So that could be an asset to Roscommon going forward. I thought he was going to take one of the 2-point opportunities. He came up at one stage yesterday to take it. So that's something we might see going forward in the league and championship if he's still in goals, because he's very strong in that aspect.
Yeah, and it was interesting, and he did it yesterday, and I hadn't seen it really at any level. Those frees that they give the goalkeeper, he was taking them off the ground, whether it was nearly on his end line or maybe in the half back line. He was actually taken off the ground, so it kind of shows the confidence he's playing with, and that he backs his ability from the deck.
Yeah, and I think they got one yesterday where I'd say it was a set play where he put it long, and Keith Doyle had gone into the full forward line, and Keith came out, won it just on the edge of the 2-point arc, and he got fouled, and I don't know, it was Darragh Cregg kicked it over from there. It looked like a preset move, but it was a huge kick. He obviously had a bit of wind with him, but he put it right from that point onto the far arc. And I suppose when you've Conor Ryan and Keith Doyle the size of them that can field ball in that area, the two together is a huge asset.
Yeah, and you're looking at the six. A big miss yesterday was Owen McCormack, who did his utmost best against David Clifford in Killarney, and he played actually a decent game. It's just that David Clifford is one of those players that unfortunately you can have a good game against, and he still comes away with 1-8. So Owen McCormack will be key. Hopefully he's not too bad in terms of an injury. But the other fellas again, Paddy Gavin is just a really decent cornerback so far. What you've seen, anyways. Caelan Keogh looks rock solid at fullback. Owen Ward. Senan Lamb is probably the one that has really impressed me these first two games. That he's one of these players that's very comfortable on the ball, but it can also break the lines. And my God, he gets on some amount of ball as well.
Yeah, he was very solid yesterday. I thought he had a fine game down in Killarney the week before. For his first game at that level, he was brilliant. He has huge athleticism, though. I've seen him playing at under 20 level, and he's hugely athletic. And I suppose he's developed on further now and is able to compete at this level. Yeah, going back to I think Paddy Gavin, he has been a good player over the last couple of years, but probably injuries has held him back a small bit. He's obviously got on top of them, and I think Caelan Keogh is very, very solid. He's a very steady player. He'll probably never set the world on fire, but he's always going. He's like Mr. Dependable.
Yeah.
He probably reminds me a bit like Niall Carty from Pierce's as well. Just he'll be always a 7 or 8 out of 10 every game.
And how important is Ronan Daly in that centre back position? Because you're have gone through the players there. Paddy Gavin, Owen Ward, Senan Lambs, Caelan Keogh's not really used to playing at this level. So to have Ronan in there, who's again just being solid, nothing's probably spectacular for it by his standards in terms of even points or flashy stuff, but just having that experience holding the middle and just guiding them through these games as well.
Yeah, I've probably seen a slightly different game than we'd normally see from Ronan. He's hugely athletic, always has been, but he's probably playing a more a holding six and commanding the game there, and Keogh, the two of them kind of hold the middle. And again, yeah, hasn't put a foot wrong. He's been good in both games.
And it's all about building a squad. We know the Bridges players will be back. I think Mark Dowd has alluded to that they will be back in for Armagh. So it'll be interesting to see how many of those are involved. I would expect them to go with the same starting team or close to it anyways. Again, Owen Colleran, I think, and Owen Ward, for instance, had been playing Sigerson Cup. So maybe that's why they didn't start. It's about managing their loads as well. So would you expect a similar, from what the squad has been now, to be starting against Armagh rather than seeing some Bridges fellas go straight into the starting team?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect to see a whole pile of change. I think with the way guys have been playing, there's no need for Mark maybe to rush them back now. Um, that might have been different if the game was lost yesterday or there was a poor performance in Killarney. He can either rest them a small bit more or get a small bit more of maybe preseason work in, which they will have missed because they were playing in them big games over the last couple of months. So they probably need to get a bit more of the longer distance and harder training done. And I suppose that'll give Mark and the lads a bit of an opportunity to do that with them.
Yeah, and you would have been in, early months training after the first couple of league games, then the 2 week break. Like, would it usually tend to be a heavy workload now? A hard week's training in this 2 weeks?
Yeah, I look at they'll probably get in one hard session now. It is really condensed. I suppose towards the end of my career, it was starting to condense, but back the time you had a lot maybe bigger windows. You had 2 and 3 weeks regular enough throughout the year, where you could go after a lot of fitness. But I suppose this week now, the next training session they'll be recovering, and they'll probably do a hard session maybe at the weekend, Friday night or that. But then they'll be back into their pre-week match week again. So it'll be just honing all the keeping everyone injury free and so on.
And a lot to be said, and it's kind of a soccer term, and nearly referring to a new manager bounce. We've seen it, a few times. Like when Davy Burke came in, we'll say we finished third in Division One. Anthony Cunningham's first year, you were there. Although we got relegated, we were actually quite decent in a lot of the games in the league, and we win Connacht. Kevin and Fergal their first year, very good league. Does it just give that bit of freshness? I don't know what it is. Like, is there a bit of a bounce in training and maybe lads coming in, newer lads there? Darragh Heaton hasn't had a look, but he's coming in and that. Does it have an effect on players?
Yeah, look at it generally does. I suppose the past has shown us that it gives, I suppose, everybody maybe on the fringes of the panel or new players a bit of impetus. I suppose all in times as well that you mentioned the first year we were going back up to Division One, each of them times.
Mm.
And the thing with Division One is there's way more of an atmosphere around it. They're like 7 championship games, Connacht championship games. That's the only way I could describe them. Just the crowds that go to them, the media attention, everyone's talking about them. Whereas with the Division 2 or 3 games, there just isn't. There's very little talk about them. They're not on the Sunday game show, all that type of stuff. There's just way more hullabaloo about them, and I think that brings everyone with you. Whereas I suppose we generally got over the last few years after that first year, there was maybe where we got relegated then, and there wasn't as much promotion of the games, I suppose.
Yeah, and it probably just gives you that bit of lift because again, the Roscommon Kerry game was the most talked about game from that opening weekend. Probably because Roscommon played so well and it was a great game. The Hoosier controversy, but again, there was eyes on it, so you're getting that exposure. And again, to come off the back of another Division One win here, going into Armagh 2 weeks, you'd imagine it'll be a big crowd in the height of that game. Again, a bit of an atmosphere. Armagh will travel, and you would be thinking it's not championship, but it's as close to championship as you'll get for that kind of feeling.
Yeah, there'll be a huge atmosphere in it. I suppose the last 2 weeks people are talking about it more. Armagh always travel in huge. There was over 4,000 in the Hyde yesterday. I wouldn't be surprised if there was 7 or 8,000
Yeah.
in the Hyde the next day, which will bring a huge atmosphere. I was watching the Galway Armagh game there. Like, there was a huge atmosphere at that game. Armagh always travel really well, so that'll bring another element to it, which would be great.
Yeah, and just finishing up, looking ahead to that game, it's great to be going in with 2 points, and it's important to be going with 2 points because it just gives us something to hold on to now. Okay, if we lose to Armagh, I'm thinking if we can pick up a win out of the next 3 games against Armagh, Galway, and Dublin, that'll have you on 4. You've Donegal at home, Mayo away the last 2. Okay, probably 2 toughest games on paper, judging what we've seen so far. But at least you just want to have a chance going into those 2 games. We don't know what kind of teams they'll be putting out as well. They might be already satisfied with their league's work. So it's probably just getting at least 1 win out of these next 3 games to give yourself a chance going into the last 2 then.
Yeah, definitely. Look, at the early running is Mayo and Donegal. They could be both in the final at that stage, and we could have different teams out. But I think, look, at the Armagh game will be as tough a challenge as we'll face in Division 1 league game. They lost against Galway there at the weekend, but were very unlucky to. They missed quite a number of chances, but they played really well in that game. They play a really fast, hard running game. They're a very, I suppose, honest sort of a team. They attack hard, they tackle hard. If there was one negative I would say about yesterday's game was maybe on the defensive side of things. Roscommon let Monaghan in a small bit too easy, particularly that first goal. You can't be doing that against Armagh, or they'll really punish you with the hard running that they do. So I think, look, that's something that Mark Dowd and the lads will be looking at keenly. Because again, even in the last 10 minutes against a better team yesterday, we would have conceded a couple more points or even a goal.
Yeah, and look, finally, it's as I said at the top of it, great to be talking about a win, and it gives everyone a lift. Us, talking about it, the fans going to the game should bring out a bigger crowd the next day, and the lads going to training as well. You can imagine the bit of a bounce now going to 2 weeks off the back of that. The disappointment in Kerry, but they knew they played well, so they know they competed very well in the first 2 games. And it's probably, I say they can't wait to go training again. You know, that kind of way, it just gives you that lift that, bring on the next one.
Yeah, it'll be huge because, as we said earlier, everyone will be talking to them about it. There'll be more publicity about it, um, and so on. But it's a huge 2 weeks, I suppose, going forward because you're into a serious block of games there, which could dictate, where you progress over the next couple of months, even up the next 18 months in terms of being in Division 1 again next year. And that's huge. The longer Roscommon can stay at that level, competing them in these games, the younger players will only get better from that. And then obviously that brings the benefits for playing in the championship going forward. So it's a huge couple of weeks for Roscommon.
Yeah, well, look, it's great to be talking about a win, 2 week break, and we'll be back for Armagh in the Height. So, Cathal, thanks very much for joining me. And remember, this episode is on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And we'll be back with a review of the Armagh game in a couple of weeks.